Watch this vidcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
Welcome back, horror hounds, to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
I'm Mike Ghostman Pickle.
And I'm James Rivera. Today we are going to be discussing upcoming 2020 horror movies, but before we get to that, we have to get to
Horror Show News.
So our news segment is going to be very short today since our main topic of discussion will be nothing but news.
The director's cut of Lars von Trier's The House That Jack Built comes to Blu-ray in February.
New Walking Dead series gets a title, The Walking Dead World Beyond, for early 2020.
Ooh, exciting.
No.
So Lars von Trier's The House That Jack Built is coming out in February. It's February 4th from Scream Factory. It's going to be a 2-disc release with the theatrical cut and the director's cut, and we'll also have an interview with Lars von Trier. In the movie, we follow Matt Dillon as he recounts his most elaborate murders as if they were works of art. And von Trier burrows so far into the killer's head, it's a little too far until you don't feel the weight of the heinous murders he is committing.
Shut up.
So I'm excited for this. I've only seen the director's cut because I went to a screening of it for the one-night screening, and I believe you went to one too.
Yeah, and I thought it was excellent.
I'm glad people who didn't get to see it for that one-night event will finally be able to see the uncut version.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that. I want to see it a couple more times. I want to see if I get the same feeling watching it a second time as I did the first time, where it became kind of whimsical, and these disturbing things you're watching on screen, you kind of...
Watch it with a normie, and I guarantee you it's going to register how disturbing it actually is.
Yeah.
So a new Walking Dead series titled The Walking Dead World Beyond is coming. It's a spin-off series created by Scott M. Gimple and Matthew Negrete. 10 episodes have been ordered. Matthew will be the showrunner after writing for The Walking Dead. It will star Julia Ormond. This just seems like a desperate ploy to keep this franchise going and going and going, since the actual Walking Dead is running out of steam, losing viewers every year. Each year, the ratings get lower and lower. You know that, right? Each season keeps dropping.
And I don't understand that strategy, to take a failing show where it's not actually failing, it's just dropping.
Declining.
Declining in popularity.
And
so
many would argue quality as well.
Yeah, so when a show is declining, why give it even more spin-offs and a movie coming up with Andrew Lincoln?
The only reason I can think of is that AMC doesn't really have anything else on its hands besides The Walking Dead. They were doing good for a while when they had Mad Men and Breaking Bad on there and The Walking Dead at the same time. It was a thriving network and a go-to place for good cable dramas. Show after show keeps bombing. They've canceled so many things. Nothing else is sticking. So they're trying to spin the wheels as much as they can to keep their one franchise that keeps their station relevant as far as original programming goes.
Yeah, well, their stuff before The Walking Dead, AMC stuff like Mad Men and stuff, it was pure quality, and then they get to The Walking Dead, and it was kind of quality mixed with a crowd-pleasing type of fun zombie show. And then as it went along, season to season, like the quality declined, and then they're just trying to do a fun show now, which often comes off as bland.
I'll be surprised. I mean, if it comes out and it's a good show, you never know. I'll be shocked. It's just at this point, it seems like they need to give the franchise a rest now and try to come up with something new.
Well, it is a good move to choose Julia Ormond.
She's an excellent actress.
Yeah. I still have never even watched Fear the Walking Dead, so I don't know when I'll be getting around to this one.
Hi, I'm Elliot. You're listening to Ghostman and Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
So before we get to discussing all the upcoming horror films of this year, Mike and I are going to discuss a few films that we've watched recently.
I watched another one from 2017, or it's actually 2019, but it was released in 2017.
And what is this film?
Because it premiered at Fantastic Fest. It's Anna and the Apocalypse. So it premiered at Fantastic Fest in 2017, and it had a limited release late in 2018. So it finally hit Amazon Prime in 2019, so I'm counting this as a 2019 horror film. It's directed by John McPhail and written by first-time writers Alan McDonald and Brian McHenry, who wrote Zombie Musical a few years ago, which this one was based on. And I thought it was interesting about Ryan McHenry. He actually died in 2015 before the movie was released. He became famous with a series of viral videos called Ryan Gosling Won't Eat His Cereal. It's just a bunch of videos with clips of Ryan Gosling movies, and there's just a spoon a spoon of cereal that comes close to his mouth, and he looks like he's trying to avoid it, like he doesn't want to eat the cereal. So McHenry died in 2015 of osteosarcoma and never got the chance to see his movie made. But Ryan Gosling posted a video of him eating cereal in tribute to him after he died, so I thought that was pretty cool.
That's a very nice gesture on his part.
But Anna and the Apocalypse stars Ella Hunt, and she is amazing as Anna. And it's basically a Christmas movie where a zombie apocalypse occurs, and high school girl Anna and her friends have to sing, dance, and fight zombies to survive. It's exactly what it sounds like, but
Exactly what it sounds like.
which sounds pretty dumb, but it's really good for what it is. I
Okay.
mean, it's a really good, solid musical, a really good zombie movie with awesome effects. It's basically a traditional musical with very strong and catchy pop songs. I wish they were a little edgier, but they were good. It plays like a really good episode of Glee with awesome zombie effects, but it's full of cliches. You kind of don't mind the cliches that much because it's an undeniably solid film. And there's a pretty funny scene as Anna is first starting to realize that there's a zombie apocalypse. She hasn't realized it yet. She has her headphones on walking through the streets and singing. And it's pretty funny that she's singing with her headphones on and she doesn't realize that zombies are brutally killing people around her.
Is it more effective as a comedy or as a horror movie?
It's actually pretty effective as both. It's clever writing, but it never rises above what it is.
Okay.
I thought for something, I wanted something a little edgier, I wanted something a little more clever, but it's just a really solid musical and a really solid zombie movie. It's basically just watching really good filmmakers put those two genres together. So if you don't like that kind of thing, you will not like this. But if it sounds interesting to you, you're liable to enjoy it.
Mike and I both watched a really good film recently from 2019 starring the great, magnificent Lin Shaye.
Yes.
It is called Room for Rent. And we actually watched this on Lin Shaye's recommendation. The last time we ran into her, we were discussing all the projects that she was doing. She said this was something that she was particularly proud of and to look out for it. So that's why we sought this movie out. And having seen it now, seen it twice, I can totally see why Lin Shaye was very proud of this movie.
Yeah, she was proud of it for good reason. It's directed by Tommy Stovall and written by first-time writer Stuart Flack. The standout is, of course, Lin Shaye as Joyce, and then Oliver Rayon as the ruggedly handsome Bob that moves in with Lin Shaye, and Valeska Miller as Sarah, the poor, unsuspecting girl who moves into her bed and breakfast. It's a sad but riveting drama thriller set in Sedona, Arizona with familiar story beats, but Lin Shaye elevates it to something special. Shaye plays Joyce, who loses her husband and gets stuck with his bills, so she has to open her home as a B&B, and things get creepy and awkward when good-looking young Bob moves in.
Lin Shaye's performance was something really special because at the beginning of this movie, when it starts off, you feel very sorry for her, and there's something very sad and endearing about her, and something kind of cute about her as an old lady. You see that in the small town in Arizona, that she's not very well respected. You have these teenage punks running around mocking her, and
it's not that exaggerated. I mean, I've seen old people being treated like this, and I hate it.
She basically gets a lot of crude sexual comments coming from her way from really disrespectful little shits. Her husband just died. She's saddled with debt. She doesn't really have anybody. And when she starts her B&B and the way she gets excited for it is a little bit sad, but there's something very endearing about the way that she comes across where you almost want to reach out and hug her.
Yeah, that's the first time in the movie you actually see her crack a smile. When she gets the idea of opening up a B&B, it's like she's not going to be lonely anymore.
And she's like this adorable little lady, so I feel like she strings you along for the way and she makes you feel a lot for the character. And then very slowly, I don't know if not too slowly actually, she starts to change. At first it seems like she's a little bit weird, she's a little bit quirky, she's a little bit off. She might make certain people uncomfortable because of the awkward things that she does. Yeah. But you're like, okay, but I accept it. But the behavior gets progressively worse and worse as it goes along. And by the end, it becomes clear that she's not just a little bit eccentric, or she's not even just disturbed. She's actually full-on psychotic and has a lot of issues. And I like the way that the story sketches itself in. At the beginning, all you know is that her husband passed away, and then as it goes along, you start to realize that they didn't have a good relationship. It seems that he likely beat her and subjugated to her to a lot of humiliation.
Yeah.
And would cheat on her very often, so she hasn't really had a very happy life. And she keeps going back to the library to check out this romance novel, this trashy romance novel, where everything ends out perfect and everything, where she meets a perfect man, almost like what a cliche view describing the perfect man in a trashy romance novel.
Yeah.
Tall, dark, rugged, handsome, and mysterious. Enter Bob, and she basically starts projecting all of her trashy fantasy novel dreams onto this one character, Bob.
Yeah. And it does a lot for the movie that it has the narration, it has the voiceover of Lin Shaye reading her romance novel. And you hear her voice over just regular mundane things, like Bob is completely unwittingly the subject of her affection. As she reads this trashy romance novel, she's imagining that as her and Bob's relationship. And she even goes so far as to make friends with one of the girls that started staying at her B&B. And she talks to the girl as if, I found a new man. He and I are a great couple. And then when she shows up and sees that this ruggedly handsome young man, she's like, something's wrong.
Wrong here. She's not going to be with this old lady. This movie really has a high level of the cringe meter. And
Yeah.
I don't mean that in a negative way because it's very intentional. But
Yeah.
some of her behavior and her outreach towards Bob and the way that she tries to flirt with him and the way she eventually starts to dress
Yeah.
in a very provocative manner that probably should be reserved for women a lot younger than her.
Yeah.
And it's almost embarrassing and awkward and it's hard to look at. And then by the end of the movie, she becomes genuinely frightening and despicable.
Yeah.
So you see a good transition from the beginning of the movie to the end, how her character changes. And I don't want to spoil what she does, but she does some pretty heinous things throughout the film.
Yeah, and she does fairly slowly become psycho, because even when she becomes obsessive and creepy, you still kind of understand her.
Mm-hmm.
You still kind of relate to her. You kind of feel bad for her still, even though she's doing creepy things. Like, she's just excited that she has these people around. She's still harmless, and until she's not harmless at all.
And then it becomes a completely different thing.
So it's a really good portrayal of a woman faced with a cruel world and stuck in a loveless marriage. So then when that marriage ends, she becomes a psychopath who takes what she wants from the world instead of being stepped on by it.
Yes. And I have to say Lin Shaye's performance is probably one of the best performances in a genre film of 2019. She's always been a magnificent actress and she's always shined. Here she proves that she can indeed carry a full movie on her own.
Yeah, and it was a really impressive character arc.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a storyline that's similar to what we've seen many times, but she kept it really fresh. And a lot of the story beats and the character interactions really kept it fresh, and it didn't feel derivative at all.
No, and it's a very low budget movie, and as far as being a piece of cinema, it's pretty spare. It's not what you would call a show off piece, but it really accomplishes what it sets out to do very well.
Yeah.
And what really sells the movie are the performances and the writing in some of the situations and the way that it all turns out and the character arcs. So overall, really solid flick. I enjoyed it quite a bit, and I thought Lin Shaye was magnificent in it. And the supporting actors were pretty good too.
Yeah.
There's a pretty solid supporting cast in here.
And I thought even the score was pretty strong. 'Cause even without a strong score, this would have been a pretty effective movie. But the score really heightens the tension every time it comes on, and it seems to come at just the right places, and it's subtle when it needs to be, it's huge when it needs to be, and I like the little things like Bob is kind of mysterious. He has secrets that aren't fully explored, and it ends up adding a layer of authenticity to the film, because you see Bob with the cuts and bruises coming in, and so he's kind of a mysterious character that added to it for me. I like the way it ends a lot, but it's not satisfying at all. You know what I mean?
I know. It's an ending that I predict a lot of people will watch, and they'll probably be pissed, and they'll probably expect a lot more. But I also think that's intentional, because it doesn't really wrap up the story, but it does give you a hint as to what's going to go on, or what's going to happen after the film ends. And in that way, I really liked it, but it's definitely on the more unconventional side of endings.
But at the end of the film that Lin Shaye's character is no longer going to be a victim in
Yes.
your life. Really good ending, just not satisfying. If you're looking for a satisfying ending, which I don't.
Yeah, I don't need a satisfying ending. I need an ending that feels true to the story, and the ending in this movie feels very true to everything that came before it. Lin Shaye did a fucking phenomenal job in this movie.
Yeah, if you like Lin Shaye, you will love her here. This is her movie. Great job, Lin Shaye. We loved it.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll gut you.
So the next one I watched wasn't nearly as good as Room for Rent, but I must say I enjoyed it. Hellboy 2019.
I've heard nothing but negative things about this,
Yes,
so
me
let's
too.
delve into this.
And even though I enjoyed it, I must agree with almost every negative thing I heard about it because it is so bad.
So you enjoyed it on a campy level or on
Yeah.
an ironic level? Okay.
Yeah. The main reason I watched it was Neil Marshall, the director, and it was written by first-time writer Andrew Crosby, and you can really tell it's a first-time writer, and that's probably one of the main reasons it suffered besides bad CGI. Mm-hmm. But David Harbour plays Hellboy, and that's one of the things I liked most about it. That's what's his name, Hopper from Stranger Things.
Yeah.
He played a really good Hellboy. Mila Jovovich as the Blood Queen, and Ian McShane as Professor Broom in a similar role that he has in John Wick's mentor in the John Wick movies. And it also a really good performance from Sasha Lane from Daniel Isn't Real. I did not know about her until Daniel Isn't Real, but between that one and this one, she's a really solid actress, and I can't wait to see more of her. She's got a really cool look too. But this one is of course based on the graphic novels, and Hellboy is the son of a fallen angel who protects mankind from supernatural threats. And dark forces seek to bring the Blood Queen, Mila Jovovich, back to life after her body was chopped up to pieces and spread across the world. And they are trying to bring her back to life so she can make Hellboy embrace his inherent evil and fight by her side. Overall, it's a bit too simple while trying to be complex. Great performances by the cast, but it doesn't do much good with a bad script. But the storylines are very uneven, and so is the CGI. Some of it looks very good, very organic, even scary, and then some of it is just straight nasty looking cartoon. Like, jeez. It's bad and campy and silly and dumb, and I enjoyed every minute of it.
Did you enjoy this in a similar way to the way that you enjoyed The Fanatic? Or is it not quite on that level of badness?
No, it's not that blatantly bad. I enjoyed it about as much as I did, what was that other one like this, where it was really fun, really bad, but it was really entertaining, like Don't Kill It
Okay.
with Dolph Lundgren. Something like that, where you're aware that you're watching a bad movie throughout, but you're entertained for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah, not exactly recommended. A definite letdown from director Neil Marshall, but as a movie, as just a popcorn movie, just sit down and watch. I'd recommend to have fun with it.
I caught up, well, not really caught up. I rewatched a movie that I was not a fan of when I saw it years ago. It is The Midnight Meat Train. It is based on the short story by Clive Barker. It is the first story to appear in the Books of Blood, apart from the intro story of the Book of Blood. So it's just basically it's about a young photographer who is looking for a good subject to capture, and he finds it when he falls asleep on the subway train in New York City. And this photographer is played by none other than Bradley Cooper. And this was actually before the Hangover movies, and this was before Bradley Cooper blew up and became a big thing. Yeah. So when I saw this at the time, years ago, back in 2008, I didn't even know that was Bradley Cooper. Mm-hmm. And seeing it now gave it a little bit different feeling. He's very good in it. Vinnie Jones also stars as the bad guy in this movie. He is the one who stays on the train every night and searches out victims who fall asleep on the train and slaughters them and takes them to a very dark tunnel underground. Seeing this movie again, I really enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was fairly suspenseful. There's a certain grottiness to it that I found that was very well made. It's not perfect. There's some really bad CGI here. Where
the CGI blood, oofa.
Yeah, there's a good handful of scenes that were done with CGI, and the blood looks like a fucking cartoon. Kind of like what you just described right now. It's so bad. And what's funny is that I remember watching this in 2008, and that being a big problem for me when I first saw it. It's only worse now. As bad as it was in 2008, it's aged like rotten milk. However, there's a lot of really good scenes in here too. There is a lot of good gore. There's cool acting performances, and it's overall a very effective movie. And I like the twists and turns as it goes along. And the reason I had a problem with this movie at first is I watched it too close to reading the Books of Blood a long time ago. The short story, The Midnight Meat Train, is a little bit more simplistic than the movie because it is a short story, so they had to expand it and embellish it a little bit. But the short story, and I should have known right off the bat that not to expect what I got out of the short story, is every bit as grotty as the movie, but Clive Barker writes it in a way that is so poetic and so sophisticated that it feels like you're reading a very high work of literature, just describing very nasty things. So the movie doesn't capture the poetry of Clive Barker's writing. I expected something a lot more sophisticated as a horror film.
Yeah.
But when you stop and think about the plot, there's no way that you could transfer his Clive Barker's literary prose to filmmaking. So that was a very wrong expectation for me to have in the first place. And now that I was able to remove that expectation, I was able to appreciate it a lot more for what it is. And what it is a very effective, very nasty little gore movie with a lot of good scenes, a lot of good kills, really solid acting, and some bad questionable CGI moments.
Yeah.
And an interesting little cameo by, I believe it was Ted Raimi.
Yeah.
Ted Raimi. I always laugh when I see him in the movie. It always makes the way that he gets killed is kind of goofy.
Yeah,
but
it's one
it is
of the most ridiculous blood CGI scenes in the movie.
It involves a sledgehammer and an eyeball falling out of a skull.
In slow motion.
In slow motion. So just imagine a real person with a cartoon eyeball and cartoon blood falling out of him, and you get an idea of what it looks like, and it looks pretty bad. But overall, I do enjoy it. I think it's a very worthwhile film. And now that I've removed myself from the expectation of it trying to match the short story it was based on, I saw a lot of its merits as a film. And overall, I really enjoyed it.
I was impressed by the cinematography. Because Bradley Cooper's character was a photographer, every frame seemed to be laid out like a photograph.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I love the colors, the richness of it is very saturated colors.
Mm-hmm.
And when the CGI blood comes in, it almost seems out of place because it approaches artistry
Mm-hmm.
up until you get to the CGI blood. It's suspenseful, it's well framed, it's well shot, well acted, and then the CGI blood comes out and you're like, ugh.
What makes it worse is there are actually some scenes that are pretty effective where you realize, like, if you just would have used a practical effect,
Yeah.
it would have looked better back then, and it would have aged a lot better now. But you could definitely see that Bradley Cooper already had movie star charisma, and you could definitely see that he was going to be somebody big. And I forgot to mention, it is directed by Ryu Kitamura. I hope I didn't butcher that name. I always apologize whenever I butcher a name. Really well worth seeking out. If you're a Clive Barker fan, you should watch it, but don't expect it to play like the short story reads.
Yeah.
Two completely different mediums, and unrealistic expectations will ruin it for you.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll stab your eardrums with an ice pick.
All right, so the next one I watched was I took way too long to watch this for Horror Tubi Roulette. We played that a few weeks ago, and I landed on The Burrowers from 2008. It was written and directed by J.T. Petty, who directed Soft for Digging back in 2001, which I heard was good, but I have not seen yet. It's got a really good but way too short appearance from Clancy Brown, who was in Pet Sematary 2 and Carnival, the HBO series.
And the voice of Lex Luthor on Superman, the animated series.
Yeah. William Mapother and Carl Geary. It's set in the Old West, where a rescue party sets out to find a family of settlers that they think were taken by Native Americans, but they were actually taken by giant creatures who burrow through the sand. To me, it felt a little bit like Tremors. It felt a lot like Bone Tomahawk. It's a solid Western, great story that is well told, and it even has a decent mystery when they're trying to find out who took these settlers. And this one leans on story, where Bone Tomahawk leans on character development, but this one has an unsatisfying conclusion to the story that made it seem pointless. Imagine Bone Tomahawk without the great character development. Since you spend so much time knowing these characters in Bone Tomahawk, you care about them more when they get attacked by the...
Is this faster paced than Bone Tomahawk?
Definitely faster paced, yeah. It's more leans on the story and the action and the monster attacks. The monster attacks were fucking awesome, by the way. The creature design was really cool. The design of their kills were really cool, which it was pretty disturbing too, because not only were they filmed well, the method that they use to kill their prey is they have these claws and they inject some type of venom or some type of paralyzing agent into someone's neck, and then it causes them to be paralyzed, but they're fully awake. And then they drag them off and put them and bury them in a shallow grave in the sand, so the dirt is barely on top of them, and they just lay there alive until they rot. And
That sounds really horrific and pretty original way to die, and I think that would scare anybody, the idea of having to live through and experience the decomposition of your body
yeah,
and not be a corpse.
There's one particularly brutal attack on a teenage boy where it's very well filmed and it's scary. And the monsters inject the paralyzing venom into his neck, and then we see the victim's POV as he's ravaged by the monster and then dragged away, and then dirt thrown on top of him until he can't see anything anymore. Because I thought that was a really effective kill, and had quite a few effective kills in here and monster attacks. But Jocelyn Donahue from House of the Devil, she was once again wasted on this one. She was one of the settlers that gets taken by the monsters in the beginning, and you literally see her interacting with her family, and then the monsters attack, and you don't even see her attack, so you don't know through the whole movie whether she's alive or not. You just know that one of the guys from this search party is trying to find her. But I never see any desperation that he's trying to find her, and then when he doesn't find her, he doesn't seem that upset by it. I can't deny that it was really exciting, and I even liked some of the characters. The ending was a little sad and confusing. Pissed me off the Tubi TV started glitching again, but not enough to kill the whole thing like the last movie I watched, Wolves, which this was much better than Wolves. But if I hadn't seen Bone Tomahawk, I would have been much more impressed with this. But it has so many similarities to Bone Tomahawk, and
But it predates Bone Tomahawk by years, though.
yeah, you can't deny how good and entertaining it is, but just knowing that a similar movie is out there that's so much better and more elevated
Makes it harder to praise this one.
yeah. But I did like it. I did have fun with it. Clancy Brown was good in it. I just hated seeing Jocelyn Donahue wasted again, so I need to put her in a nice juicy role.
We would now like to present to you a list of upcoming 2020 horror films that we are looking forward to very much.
This is a pretty long list, but it's by far not everything that's coming out in 2020. And there's probably some more things that we're going to get excited about, but it was really overwhelming going through these because there's a whole slew of mainstream horror that's coming out because horror is mainstream now. And there's also an even bigger slew of independent horror films coming out. So it's going to be a good year.
And bear in mind that as the year goes on, more release dates are going to be announced, and we're going to hear about more projects popping up.
Yeah.
This is just what we could dig up as of right now. So let's get it started.
Horror show exclusive.
And we're going to take this in chronological order, starting with the one that's going to release first, earliest in the year. So on January 24th, The Turning is going to be released, directed by Floria Sigismondi. I think I said that right. She directed 2010's The Runaways and also did music videos for David Bowie, Justin Timberlake, Rihanna, Katy Perry, Marilyn Manson, The Awesome Bjork, The Cure, The Awesome Fiona Apple, Incubus, Muse, and Leonard Cohen. Should be interesting.
That's quite an impressive lineup of artists to be directing music videos for.
And especially with a movie like The Runaways under her belt. So I thought that was a really good movie. I've always been a big fan of Joan Jett.
I never got to see that, but I did hear a lot of positive things about it, and a couple people recommended it to me.
It's a modern take on the 19th century novel The Turning of the Screw by Henry James. The synopsis is, for more than 100 years, a deeply haunting tale has been passed down to terrify audiences. Next January, DreamWorks Pictures' The Turning takes us to a mysterious estate in the Maine countryside, where newly appointed nanny Kate, played by Mackenzie Davis, is charged with the care of two disturbed orphans, Flora, played by Brooklyn Prince, and Miles, played by Finn Wolfhard of It Chapter 2, sorry. Quickly, she discovers that both the children and the house are harboring dark secrets, and things may not be as they appear. This is from Universal Studios. And the script comes from The Conjuring writers, Chad and Carrie Hayes, and it's going to be rated PG-13.
We'll see. PG-13 horror could be effective. I'm not hating, because it is, especially if it's supernatural. So hopefully they do a good job with this one. I did see the trailer. I thought the trailer looked pretty good.
And Chad and Carrie Hayes are really good writers. And they ventured away from the Conjuring universe. They aren't doing The Conjuring 3. Yeah, they co-wrote The Conjuring 2, but they're not doing Conjuring 3, so now they're turning to other movies.
The other movie that's coming out on the same day, January 24th, is Color Out of Space.
I'm excited about this one.
This is directed by Richard Stanley, written by Richard Stanley and Scarlett Amaris, based on H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Color Out of Space.
Yes.
Stars Nicolas Cage, Tommy Chong,
Oh, yeah.
Joey Richardson, Madeline Arthur, and Q'orianka Kilcher. Hope I didn't butcher that name. It made its debut at the Toronto Film Festival, where it was met with very positive reviews and reaction. The synopsis is very brief. A meteorite lands in the yard of the Gardner family home, unleashing unimaginable horrors. As of right now, it has no rating from the MPAA.
Yes, H.P. Lovecraft, Nicolas Cage, yes please. Follow up to Mandy.
It seems like Nicolas Cage has been back as far as his career goes, and I think so long as Nicolas Cage sticks with over-the-top, outsized types of films, he can fit into it very well.
Yeah.
And there's very few things that are more over-the-top and stylized than the writing of H.P. Lovecraft. And let's face it, we do not have enough adaptions of H.P. Lovecraft out there in the horror universe, so it'll be exciting to see a new one come along. It's been met with, like, the response to this has been generally pretty enthusiastic at film festivals, and I'm looking forward to Nicolas Cage in another surreal environment.
Yeah, it seems like surreal experimental directors, horror directors are drawn to Nicolas Cage now, especially after Mandy. They're like, I want to get in on that.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll cut your nose off and feed it to my goldfish.
The next movie coming out is February, on Valentine's Day, February 14th. It's Fantasy Island. I'm not so excited about this one, but it could be good. It's directed by Jeff Wadlow, who directed Kick-Ass 2 and Truth or Dare, which is not a good sign because Truth or Dare was a trash fire. It was written by Gillian Jacobs, Chris Roach, and Jeff Wadlow. It's based on ABC's 1977 TV series of the same name, which was a silly drama about a fantasy island with Hervé Villachez and Ricardo Montalban. It stars Michael Pena, Maggie Q, I love her, Lucy Hale, she's cute, Austin Stowell, and Portia Doubleday, Jimmy O. Yang, Ryan Hansen, and Michael Rooker. That's a good addition.
Michael Rooker, Henry.
It's a Blumhouse production, and the synopsis is the enigmatic Mr. Rourke, played by Michael Pena, makes the secret dreams of his lucky guests come true at a luxurious but remote tropical resort. But when the fantasies turns into nightmares, the guests have to solve the island's mystery in order to escape with their lives, and this one has no rating yet.
I'm pretty sure this is going to be a rated R film. Based on the trailers that we saw, it seems like they want to take it to a more disturbing place. If you're going to take something a little cheesy or pop culture kitschy, the way that Fantasy Island was, and transport it to horror, you have to make it a little bit more fucked up.
Yeah.
Just to sell that you're inverting something that was considered formula or cheesy or a little cliche, and turning it on its head.
I don't see a little person that's supposed to be playing the Hervé Villachez part. They're playing, boss, they're playing.
Shut up.
We watched the trailer on the podcast. The trailer looks like it could be good, it could be bad. We don't know yet, but we'll be definitely keeping our eyes open for this. I just think it's funny that with the Banana Splits movie, that a lot of production companies are taking old TV shows or stuff that might be a little bit forgotten by the public and reinventing them for horror audiences. So who knows what other kitschy pop culture thing from the past is going to be reinvented as a horror movie.
Blumhouse has been notorious for taking pre-existing IPs and taking a lot of liberties with the story. So it's been hit or miss, so let's see how this one is.
On February 14th, which is also the same day Fantasy Island comes out, VFW comes out, and I'm looking forward to this a lot more than Fantasy Island.
Oh yeah, me too.
This is directed by Joe Bagos, who just did The Magnificent Bliss which is definitely going to be on my top 10 horror films of 2019
Mine
list.
too.
I really loved that film, and after that, it was such a unique, energetic work and so stylized that I'd be looking forward to anything this filmmaker does after that. It's written by Max Brallier and Matthew McArdle. It's starring Martin Cove, William Sadler, the great Bill Sadler,
Yes.
Stephen Lang, Sierra McCormick, and Fred Williamson,
Ooh.
the cult icon Fred Williamson. The synopsis is: a group of war veterans must defend their local VFW, which stands for Veterans of Foreign Wars. They must defend their local VFW post and an innocent teen against a deranged drug dealer and his relentless army of punk mutants. This is going to be released by Fangoria Studios. The film currently has a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes from its festival run, and it is currently not yet rated. This sounds like it's right up my alley. I love what Joe Bagos did with Bliss was he took vampire lore and turned it on its head and gave us a fresh, unique look at the vampire subgenre. So I'm hoping he does the same thing with these punk mutant characters.
Yeah.
I could definitely see punk rock being a big part of it because Bliss had an excellent hard rock soundtrack, and you don't really see too many films these days with a very overt rock soundtrack the way that movie had.
And
So
be
I
that
imagine
effective.
and be that effective. So I imagine this one will have a punk rock soundtrack. Here's hoping for that. I don't know anything else beyond it besides that, but that is enough to make this one of my most anticipated horror releases of the year.
Yeah, and Joe Bagos has been around for a little while, so he's got some movies out that I need to go back and watch, but he leaped onto my radar this year with Bliss. Like, holy shit.
Fantastic film.
Now I have to see everything this guy has done and everything he does from now on. That's why I'm really excited about VFW. Another one that's very high on my list of anticipated movies of 2020 is Come to Daddy. It's with stars Elijah Wood. It's coming out February 21st, but it says it's coming out in Japan, so there's no definite release date for the US, but it's probably around that time. It just probably hasn't been announced yet. It's directed by Ant Thompson and written by Toby Harvard, who wrote The Greasy Strangler. That is a promising prospect right there, because Greasy Strangler was really good. Like, ridiculous, over the top.
But this movie seems like it's going in a different direction, though.
Yeah. It's written by the Greasy Strangler writer, and it's based on the director's idea. It stars Elijah Wood, Stephen McHattie from Pontypool. I've been waiting for this guy to be in another major movie after Pontypool, and it's finally here. I cannot wait to see this. It also stars Martin Donovan, who is in Weeds and Inherent Vice. And the synopsis is: a man in his 30s travels to a remote cabin to reconnect with his father and get something more terrifying than he imagined. It's screened at Tribeca Film Festival, at Beyond Fest, and also at Fright Fest, among many others. It's a first-time director, but he produced ABCs of Death, Housebound, Turbo Kid, Deathgasm, and The Greasy Strangler, and it's going to be rated R.
I really like the work that Elijah Wood does in the horror genre, and I really like his performances.
Yes.
And he really impressed me in the Maniac remake, and he's just been impressing me all around. So
I love Cooties too.
Oh yeah, and Cooties too. So his involvement is enough to get me excited alone on this. It seems like a very odd, creepy premise. I love that type of awkward horror, something like Creep, or even Room for Rent, which we just saw, that starts off seeming a little bit normal with the very character who might be sympathetic but a little off,
Yeah.
and how the situation escalates to, by the end, you're creeped out by them. I don't know if that's what this movie is going to do, but it seems like it's going to be headed in that direction. And we all know Elijah Wood is more than capable of portraying creepy, awkward people.
And I can only assume that Elijah Wood is going to be the son, and then the dad is going to be played by Stephen McHattie.
That's what I imagine as
I
well.
really hope so, because even if I didn't hear anything else about this, just hearing that those two were coming out in a horror movie, I'd be super excited about it. But everything else seems to be lining up that this is going to be a really good movie.
The presence of a writer of The Greasy Strangler promises, if nothing else, this should be at least a little bit subversive and transgressive, hopefully a little bit trashy,
Yeah.
and a little bit uncomfortable.
A little batshit.
Little batshit.
So can't wait for that one. Come to Daddy, coming out February 21st.
And on February 25th, just 4 days later, Greenlight comes out. This is another indie film. Its director, co-writer Graham Denham. It's his first feature film, with the story by Patrick Robert Young. It is starring Daniel Bisutti, Barb in The Curse of Chucky, Chris Browning, and Carolyn Williams, who is stretched from Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2.
Yes.
That is awesome. Synopsis is: a director lands his dream gig only to be forced to film a real-life murderer. It won Best Thriller at Shriekfest and got a standing ovation there. It's supposed to be a dark comedy, psychological thriller, and a thoughtful rumination on blind ambition. No rating at this point, but it looks like it's going to be a rated R just based on everything that I keep hearing about it. This is another one I'm pretty excited for too. Even though it's a first-time director, I do like the cast. We've been to Shriekfest before, and we know what kind of films that come out of there, and I usually like them.
Shriekfest usually has a lot of good features, so if this won the whole thing and got a standing ovation, you know it's going to be good.
I'm sure the presence of Carolyn Williams doesn't hurt either, because Carolyn Williams is a horror icon.
And the next movie we're going to discuss, it comes out February 28th. We've talked about this a few times on the podcast. It's Leigh Whannell's The Invisible Man. It's written and directed by Leigh Whannell, who just did Upgrade recently, and it's loosely adapted from H.G. Wells, and it's a reboot of the 1933 film. It's starring Elizabeth Moss and Oliver Jackson Cohen. The synopsis is: trapped in a violent, controlling relationship with a wealthy and brilliant scientist, Cecilia Cass, played by Elizabeth Moss, escapes in the dead of night and disappears into hiding, aided by her sister, Harriet Dyer, their childhood friend, Aldous Hodge, and his teenage daughter, played by Storm Reed. But when Cecilia's abusive ex, Oliver Jackson Cohen, commits suicide and leaves her a generous portion of his vast fortune, Cecilia suspects his death was a hoax. As a series of eerie coincidences turn lethal, threatening the lives of those she loves, Cecilia's sanity begins to unravel as she desperately tries to prove that she is being hunted by someone that no one can see.
This is another one that's really high on my list of anticipations because Leigh Whannell has already more than proven himself as an excellent writer of horror and genre films.
Yeah.
And what really cemented him for me was Upgrade, which has actually made my top 10 of horror films list of 2018.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see where he goes as a filmmaker. I love the Invisible Man story. I like how he's reinventing it and updating it for the modern age. And he couldn't have picked better people. Elizabeth Moss is a fantastic actress. She was great as Peggy in Mad Men. I haven't seen The Handmaid's Tale, but I hear she's really good in that.
Yeah.
And she was excellent in the recent 2019 film Her Smell, a film that should be getting her more awards recognition, but it's a little bit too under the radar to capture that type of recognition that you would need to get on the award circuit. Regardless, she's a fantastic actress. I really like Oliver Jackson Cohen a lot. He was Luke Crane on The Haunting of Hill House.
Yeah.
Very good actor. I want to see Leigh Whannell's next step, his evolution as an artist. I really like him a lot.
Well, I normally wouldn't be excited about another big studio attempt at a Universal monster movie.
But it's from Leigh fucking Whannell, though.
Yeah, but it's Leigh Whannell, and it's not just Leigh Whannell being hired to rehash a Universal monster movie. This is a passion project that he's wanted to do for a long time. He's had an idea that he feels is fresh. He's proud of the script that he wrote, and if he's proud of that script, I gotta see this because he's one of my favorite writers of the last 20 years. And he proved himself as a director with Upgrade, so I'm all in on this one.
There's a lot of talented screenwriters out there who would not be able to pull off a good film, but he was able to deliver a script that was unique, original, and exciting, and matched it with filmmaking that was on par with it. It's visually stimulating to look at. It's a very imaginatively filmed world, and it's very cinematic, and you could tell that he really got into the technical aspects of filmmaking. So I only imagine this one is going to be a step even further.
You're listening to Ghostman Rivera's Horror Show podcast.
On March 20th, A Quiet Place 2 comes out. We played the trailer on our last episode. Written and directed by John Krasinski, Jim Halpert from The Office.
Yep.
Starring his wife Emily Blunt, Cillian Murphy, Djimon Hounsou, Millicent Simmons, and Noah Jupe. Synopsis. Following the deadly events at home, the Abbott family must now face the terrors of the outside world as they continue to fight for survival in silence. Forced to venture into the unknown, they quickly realize that the creatures that hunt by sound are not the only threats that lurk beyond the sand path. That is the synopsis from Paramount Pictures. It currently has no rating. I think that there's a good potential for this to be better than A Quiet Place, especially since John Krasinski was, I think, did a solid job directing the film. He was a very solid filmmaker. I imagine this one's going to be improved, and I hope that they explore the mythology behind this world to a much greater extent. And I actually think that based on the trailer, I really think it has the potential to be a better film than A Quiet Place was.
Yeah, because they not only show a lot more monsters, they go all the way back to the beginning when the apocalypse first started.
And of course, it's going to be a big blockbuster hit. As we all know, A Quiet Place was one of the biggest horror films of 2018 and really made an impact.
But besides this being about creatures who hunt by sound, which makes it stand apart, but other than that, it seems like the typical premise for a decent zombie apocalypse film, where the real threats are other people, not the monsters. You know, if it wasn't John Krasinski who brought us the awesome original Quiet Place, I wouldn't be as excited about this because, like I said, it does seem very typical. But just judging by what Krasinski's done, and the footage and what Krasinski's done so far with the first one, I'm excited about this one. I really hope he does something fresh with it and it rises above that typical apocalypse movie. Next one is one that we also watched the trailer for it last week. It's coming out March 27th. It's Saint Maud. Written and directed by Rose Glass. This is her debut feature film. Starring Morfydd Clark and Jennifer L. Produced by A24, it's a British Christian psychological horror film. It had its debut at the Toronto International Film Festival, where it was greeted with ecstatic reviews and response, and it was compared to Carrie and The Exorcist and Under the Skin. Apparently Danny Boyle is a big fan of it. The synopsis is, hospice nurse Maud, played by Morfydd Clark, has recently converted to Roman Catholicism and is concerned that she may be possessed when she becomes infatuated with Amanda, played by Jennifer L., a former dancer in her care, and it's going to be rated R.
I'm sure this is going to be another divisive A24 movie. It looks like another film that falls into the elevated horror subcategory that's developed in the past 6 or 7 years of film like Hereditary and The Witch. This is another one that's very high on as far as anticipation goes, only because A24 has proven to have an impressive track record overall. Besides the horror genre, they're just a great movie studio that takes a lot of risks, a lot of chances, and I like that they trust the artist to shape the vision of their films, and they don't try to exert the type of mass-marketed, audience-tested control over its creators' visions.
Yeah, and they don't listen to the critics.
And they don't listen to the critics either, and that's what I really like about them. I'm sure a lot of people are going to hate it, but Danny Boyle likes it, and Danny Boyle is an excellent filmmaker, so that gives me good hope. And I'll be honest, I just love the slate of A24 horror movies that came out, where it's between Ari Aster and Robert Eggers, and even a film like In Fabric, and even one that I didn't like It Comes at Night. I'll give it credit for being a ballsy vision, for being something that took chances creatively. And everything I hear about it sounds like it's exciting. It looks like we might, and I hope I'm not overhyping it, but we might have another Hereditary or The Witch on our hands here.
Yeah, what was that movie? Was it Goodnight Mommy?
Goodnight Mommy. That's actually a really good movie too.
It gives me that kind of vibe. This one with the cinematography looks similar. It has a similar color scheme to it and look.
Another thing that excites me about it, it's as far as horror films go, my favorite subgenre or subgenres are usually satanic horror movies, witch-based horror movies, or religious horror films.
Yeah.
Those ones tend to be the creepiest films in that subgenre because they really try to delve into the evil at a much deeper level. And the trailer for this movie actually looks really good as well. So this is very high on my list. I'm very excited to check out Saint Maud. On May 15th, an untitled Saw sequel is coming out. The working title is The Organ Donor, and that's very likely to change. It is directed by Darren Lynn Bousman, who also did Saw 2 and Repo the Genetic Opera. It is written by Josh Stolberg and Pete Goldfinger from a story by none other than Chris Rock.
Nice.
It is starring Chris Rock, Samuel L. Jackson, Max Minghella, and Marisol Nichols. It marks Bousman's return to the franchise. His last time at the helm was for Part 4. There's no synopsis for this, and the details are very scant. There's no rating yet, but I assume it's going to be rated R. And if it's not, then
Better be. There'll be riot in the streets if it's not.
what gives me hope for this one is that Chris Rock is involved, and that sounds very strange for him to get involved, but I don't think Chris Rock doesn't really tackle scripts or do things like this and isn't really known for the horror genre, so I doubt that he would have just jumped into this if he didn't have a good idea from the get-go and wasn't confident in his vision. And the fact that we're getting Darren Lynn Bousman to return to the franchise as well, who's not been part of it for a very long time, and the presence of Samuel L. Jackson, which I would have never expected in a Saw film. This isn't one of the highest on my release, highest on the list as far as anticipation for me personally, but it is something I'm very curious to see how it turns out and what Chris Rock came with to add to the Saw mythology.
Yeah, because Chris Rock is one of the greatest and funniest comedians ever in history. Not only is he an excellent comedian, he's very clever. He's got a very cool head on his shoulders. So I think this is going to be original. It's going to be clever.
And I imagine there's going to be a sense of humor too.
Yeah, some dark comedy. Because he did Top 5, and that was a really underrated film.
I never got to see that.
It was really underrated with him and Rose, Clerks 2.
Oh, Rosario Dawson.
Rosario Dawson. Damn it, why couldn't I remember her name? After seeing Top 5 and knowing what a great comedian Chris Rock is, I'm definitely looking forward to his Saw sequel. And I haven't watched a Saw movie since 3, and this is the first time that I've been excited to watch one, so I'll definitely be checking this one out. The franchise, even the movies that were rumored to be bad, even though I haven't seen them, they do involve some very talented people who branched off to do a lot of great things, like The Collector and movies like that. And Darren Lynn Bousman going off and doing his movies. The next one comes out June 12th. It's another one we've been talking about quite a bit. Candyman. This one's directed by Nia DaCosta, written by Jordan Peele and Wynn Rosefield. It's produced by Universal Studios and Jordan Peele's Monkey Paw Productions. It stars Tony Todd as Candyman, as well as Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, Tayona Paris, Nathan Stewart Jarrett, and Coleman Domingo. It's said to be a spiritual sequel, as we said before, but we're both a little confused. Who is Candyman exactly?
When the story first broke, it was announced that Yahya Abdul-Mateen II would be taking on the role of Candyman, and I just saw him in the Damon Lindelof HBO Watchmen TV series, and he was excellent. He sold me on the fact that as an actor, he's perfect for the part. Now they're saying Tony Todd is Candyman?
Yeah.
That's really confusing. Yahya is being billed as Anthony Ray on Wikipedia, not as Candyman, as Anthony Ray, and on IMDb he has no character name. Tony Todd is listed as Candyman on Wikipedia and as a character named Styx on IMDb. So who knows what they're up to or what they're concocting behind the scenes. I think they're probably trying to keep it deliberately confusing, because we know it is connected to the original and we don't know which way. I'm still looking very forward to this regardless of however this turns out.
Well, at first I thought Tony Todd was going to be the original Candyman who recruited Yahya Abdul-Mateen as the new Candyman, but then why is Tony Todd listed as Styx on IMDb? Doesn't make sense.
I'm sure when we see the film it'll actually all clear itself up.
But the synopsis says, of course, it's a spiritual sequel to the 1992 horror film Candyman that returns to the now gentrified Chicago neighborhood where the legend began. And there's no rating yet on this one, but hopefully it'll be R.
See, this is another one where I might not normally be interested or as excited for a Candyman reboot, but the fact that Jordan Peele is heavily involved in producing it and working on the script and the talented actors tells me that, if nothing else, this is going to be an original take on the Candyman. And we all know what a big fan Jordan Peele is of the horror genre and how he's become one of the leading voices in horror right now, I would say. And it shows Jordan Peele branching out even further and marking himself as one of the definitive horror content creators of our time. On August 14th, which is a little bit over a month later, we are going to be getting Malignant, directed by the great James Wan, who we all know as the director of the Conjuring films.
This is my most anticipated film of the year. I'm excited about this one.
As well as the director of the original Saw. It is written by Ingrid Bisou and James Wan. based on an idea from Ingrid Basu, I believe. It stars Annabelle Wallace, Jake Abel, Jork Young, Maddie Hassan, Mishko Brianna White, and Jacqueline McKenzie. It's based on James Wan's graphic novel Malignant Man. The synopsis is under wraps, and very is little yet known about the kind of horror film it's going to turn out to be. James Wan has done a really good job of keeping the lid on this film and not really letting any details leak about it. We know it's lower budget, and it's more of a return to his roots, but we don't know what the synopsis is. We don't know what the premise is. We don't know if this is supernatural horror or if it's realistic horror.
And James Wan has been posting set photos on his Instagram, and all we know so far is it has practical effects, no CGI, and it also has real sets and no sound stages, which I'm very excited about.
I'm always excited for any film that does approaches the craft with more practical, less computer-generated ideas.
Yeah, and James Wan started venturing way away from horror with the big blockbuster action movies like the Fast and the Furious film that he did, and then Aquaman, which both films were really good, especially Aquaman was really good. But I was still sad that he had ventured so far away from the horror genre, so it's great to see him come back and go back to his roots and do a stripped-down, scary-ass horror film, and I'm really hoping it's as scary as I think it's going to be. And the next one also comes from the mind of James Wan, but he's not directing this one. On September 11th, we're going to get The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. It's directed by Michael Chavez, who just directed The Curse of La Llorona. And it's a story by David Leslie Johnson and James Wan. And it's written by David Leslie Johnson, who also wrote The Orphan, awesome, Red Riding Hood, bleh, and also co-wrote The Conjuring 2 and wrote Aquaman, and is rumored to be writing a new Nightmare on Elm Street. This one stars, of course, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson as the paranormal investigation team, Ed and Lorraine Warren. It also stars Julian Hilliard, the little kid who played the young Luke on Haunting of Hill House, and he's also in Color Out of Space, so this kid's really getting out there. And our friend Ronnie Blevins.
Yes, Ronnie Blevins has worked on films with us. Mike's current upcoming feature film debut, Pay Up. He actually did lend a helping hand with that. And he was also on David Lynch's Twin Peaks: The Return in 2017.
I do know that there's a young Ed and Lorraine Warren in here. The film is going to begin with the Warrens fighting for the soul of a young boy, then fast forwards to a murder case where a real murder case where a murder suspect, Arnie Cheyenne Johnson, killed his landlord in 1981 and claims that demonic possession was to blame. It's supposed to involve a demon that appears as a werewolf, and when asked whether this film would follow that particular case, director Michael Chavez said only that The Conjuring 3 would be bigger than that. And there's no rating yet, but
we presume it's going to be R-rated.
Yeah, it should be, because they actually went for an R rating with 1 and 2, which I think is really cool, because neither one of them had any cursing or nudity or anything like that. It's just they go for rated R just for scares.
Listen to this podcast, or I'll gouge your eyes out.
So the last film that we're going to talk about for upcoming 2020 horror comes out on October 16th, and this is one that I know Mike and I are both heavily anticipating.
Yep.
It is Halloween Kills.
Yay.
The follow-up to the sequel/reboot Halloween from 2018.
Which we're both a big fan of.
Yes. Directed by David Gordon Green, written by Danny McBride, Scott Teems, and David Gordon Green. So it's basically the same team that brought us the excellent Halloween in 2018. We know not everybody agrees with us about that, though. John Carpenter will be returning to score the film. It is going to be starring Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer, Andy Matchik, Dylan Arnold, Kyle Richards, Charles Cyphers, Nancy Stevens, and Anthony Michael Hull. Being produced by Universal Studios and Blumhouse Productions. The film marks the return of characters from the 1978 original. Kyle Richards is reprising her role as Lindsay Wallace. Charles Cyphers is reprising his role of Sheriff Lee Brackett,
nice.
While Anthony Hall will be stepping in for Brian Andrews as Tommy Doyle. This was filmed back-to-back with Halloween Ends, and this is supposed to be the new Halloween trilogy. Halloween Ends is scheduled to be released almost exactly a year later on October 15th, 2021. This is the synopsis. The saga of Michael Myers and Laurie Strode continues in the next thrilling chapter of the Halloween series. Doesn't tell us anything. And it's
Yeah.
going to be rated R. So I'm looking forward to it. I was a big fan of Halloween. I liked how it cleaned up the clutter of all the convoluted mythology that the sequels forced onto it. And it took Michael Myers and the Halloween mythology back to its roots. And Michael Myers was restored to his stature as the Shape, the boogeyman. And I thought overall they did a really good job with that movie. It was really well filmed. The score was good. Jamie Lee Curtis, who, as we would have expected, of course, was awesome in it. I'm looking forward to seeing Jamie Lee Curtis in this again. I'm looking forward to seeing the return of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I'm just overall, this is one that I'm really excited for. I'm a die-hard Halloween geek, so anytime Michael Myers appears in a movie, I get excited. Even when it's been in the crappier ones and the ones I didn't enjoy as much, I've always been excited just to see Michael Myers back on the big screen.
Well, I don't have any major complaints about Halloween 2018 at all, but I do understand some of the complaints, like that maybe there was a little bit too much fan service, and I think there will be none of that in this one.
It's been gotten out of the way already.
Yeah, they got the fan service out of the way, which I personally really enjoyed. So now I feel they're going to take it in a new direction, and I'm really excited for it.
And that's a perfect one to close our list off with, because it's from one of the most, if not the most, iconic horror franchise in history.
Horror show exclusive.
Now, I did talk about my movie, The Burrowers, which I chose for the last time we played Horror Tubi Roulette.
You didn't choose; that's what you landed on.
Yeah, that's what I was given by the Tubi gods. Anyway, we usually play after we discuss one of our Horror Tubi Roulette movies. We usually play it, but since we went so long and this is a big topic on this one, talking about all the 2020 horror films, we're going to wait till next week. So look forward to that next week. We're going to play Horror Tubi Roulette again. That's always a popular little segment on the show.
And follow our page. Follow our Facebook page and our Instagram pages, which are
at Pickles Horror Show on Instagram and /Pickles Horror Show on Facebook. And you'll look for upcoming details on our season 1 and 2 of our horror show, variety show in American Horror. Season 1 and 2 is going to be released pretty soon on Blu-ray, and is also going to be on the streaming section of American Horrors, where you'll be able to rent the episodes. And also we are working on finishing my feature film Pay Up, and that will be coming out this year. So we'll keep you posted on that, both here on the podcast and on the pages.
Until next week, folks, happy horror.